My name is Evan Makarov, and I will be ranking every single horror movie that I watched from the year 2024. Um, just a couple disclaimers. This is just my opinion for one, and for two, I have not seen every single horror movie from 2024. I have not seen Terrifier 3 yet, um, but I do plan on it. And if you want me to make a video about it, let me know in the comments. I don't know. Um, so the reason why I'm making this video, it's October, so I want to make a horror movie video of some sort, and the 2024 was just one of the best years for horror movies, I think, just ever. There are so many movies that are considered to be the greatest of the genre that came out from that year alone, and I watched plenty of them, so I figured why not make a video. I watched 33 of them. Before we get to the main part of the video, I just want to say that this is also a little bit of shameless self-promotion. This video is brought to you by my short film Killer, which is coming on YouTube this Halloween, Friday, October 31st. It's my senior thesis project. I've been working on it for 2 years now. So very, very exciting to finally, put this guy out and show everyone. This is a horror movie about a student trying to write a essay about horror movies and slashers, but he finds himself in one. And that's all I will say. Very inspired, very much inspired by Halloween and Scream. I also got some other projects that I've been working on, and it's gonna be exciting, slow but exciting. Would mean a lot to me if you would give this a watch this Halloween. So yeah, moving on to the video. Starting off at the bottom, Afraid, a horror movie that revolves around AI, and it's one of the few movies this year. When I saw the trailer for it, I was really hoping for it to be so bad it was good, but it was just bad and boring in the worst way possible. A movie about AI being boring today is not that great. The script was just terrible. It uses the characters and all the plot devices just so effortlessly, and by effort in the bad way, effortlessly, and just so carelessly too. There was so many bad direction and so many bad ideas that really made this into a very boring horror movie, and my least favorite horror movie of 2024. Tarot, this is another predictable horror film that is brought to you by Screen Gems. I didn't find this movie to be very scary, and I didn't like any of the characters. I was just waiting for them to die. Everything that happened in the movie I saw coming a mile away. I will say this movie does have competent cinematography, but that alone doesn't save the movie. This movie was just borderline unwatchable. Next is The Strangers Chapter 1. Now that's funny. As I'm recording this, last weekend, The Strangers Chapter 2 came out. But anyways, this new reboot of The Strangers is just very unnecessary. And I feel like it only exists to make the producers and the studio money. And they already have, I mean, there's now a sequel out as I'm recording this, and allegedly another one on the way, and I'm not looking forward to them. And they somehow made even a worse movie in the franchise than the previous installment, Prey at Night, which I really also don't like as well. But this movie made me appreciate Prey at Night a little bit more than I initially did when I saw that movie. But the fact that you made a Strangers movie that's worse than another bad horror movie that I really despise is somehow an achievement. So next up is Imaginary, directed by Jeff Waldlow. He is a filmmaker who I've been following since I've seen Kick-Ass and Truth or Dare. I will say, this movie actually does have a pretty decent last 15 minutes. The finale is alright, but the rest of the movie is just so uneventful and so unscary and unmemorable as well. This movie's kind of criminally boring for the most part until those last 15 minutes. I'm not a fan of the movie. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. This is a movie that I would say is so bad it's good. I do also love the first Winnie the Pooh horror movie for pretty much the same reasons that I like this movie. It's just really it's so bad it's good. I will say this movie does have a slight improvement over the makeup and masks and some of the gore effects. I think because it has a much higher budget than the first movie. The movie's just gonna look better. However, the screenwriting and acting and directing, I mean, very little effort was put into those, and it makes it very laughable, and makes it easy to laugh at when characters die, and it just gets ridiculous. And when it gets ridiculous, it's for the audience. I would say it's a great time, but as objective filmmaking, it's just really bad. Just so many mistakes and just like editing and just like seeing that unfold is just really entertaining. I do like this new wave of like IP losing copyright, so now people can make stuff like this. I do like this new wave of like horror movies using these characters, and I think in terms of being entertaining, this new Winnie the Pooh franchise is probably the best one. So in terms of so bad it's good movies, at least that came out from this year, I would say I would recommend this one. Next up is Night Swim. This is the first weekend of January horror movie of the year. And the concept of like a pool killing people is really cool for a short film. For a 100-minute long movie, it's repetitive and boring. Not a scary movie at all, and I was just waiting for it to end. Next is The Front Room. This is the debut feature from the half brothers of Robert Eggers. Robert Eggers is a well-known horror movie director who's made, The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and Nosferatu, which we'll get into later in the video. Stay tuned. Keep watching, please. However, I would say that The Front Room is nowhere near as good as Robert Eggers' stuff. This movie does have pretty good performances, and it has some cool ideas in terms of where the story is going. However, the horror and the movie itself just relies on the grossness of what a character does, mainly the main antagonist. And it just ended up being more annoying than scary, and it was a movie experience that I found to be more frustrating than just enjoyable as a movie in general. This movie I did not have fun with at all. It was just I struggled watching through it. That said, I do hope the filmmakers do get another shot at making something, because I do think they do have the talent. At least they seem to. But we'll see in their next project. So, Hellboy the Crooked Man. This is not really a horror movie. It's a superhero action movie, but it does have horror elements, and it does attempt to be scary with those. And at least with what budget they had, it's not bad. There are some moments that are really cool, and there's some cool ideas with some VFX, but the movie is very clearly incomplete, and that's just the state it was left in when it was released. The script I also found to be quite generic and just, nothing special about it. It has a lot of cliches. It's, the fifth Hellboy movie? I don't know. Next is The Deliverance. This is a movie by Lee Daniels, and it's a movie that I would argue that has very good themes and a lot of good ideas for what story is trying to tell. And I want to say it's trying to have a sense of importance. However, the execution on everything except the acting falls flat. I think the acting is really good. All the actors do very well with what they're given with. However, what they're given with is really not interesting and really not scary, which makes this movie very much not effective. It has nothing new to add. It has nothing new to offer to the horror genre itself. The characters are just unlikable, and every decision they make just makes me want them to like go through the worst shit possible. this movie also just has objective filmmaking mistakes, especially when it comes to cinematography and editing in the finale. It is very rough. It kind of came off like a rough cut, but they just decided not to fix any issue after watching it like probably one time. That's what it felt like to me, at least. This movie just wasn't good, and I don't recommend it. Next movie is a pretty interesting one. It's called The Exorcism, starring Russell Crowe. Now, the year before that, actually, so 2022, 2023, there's a movie called The Pope's Exorcist, also starring Russell Crowe, about a pope, turning into a, you know, turning into a demon, and an exorcism needs to happen. This movie kind of has the same plot, and it has very similar marketing and similar posters. But this movie is about an actor who plays the pope, and who ends up getting possessed by a demon. And I think this is a really cool concept. It's the first half is more funny than scary, but I think some of the comedy bits pay off. It's the comedy itself is hit or miss, but halfway through the movie it turns more into horror, and when it tries to get scary, it's not effective, unfortunately. Everything that was developed with Russell Crowe's character feels like it was just thrown away and forgotten about for the rest of the movie, and the scares themselves were just plain and boring and alright, and I didn't really care for them. Very, very ineffective. An ineffective horror movie. Next is The Platform 2. I am a massive fan of the original film that came out in 2020, but I was really much let down by this, and I just have to ask what went wrong. This is the first movie on the list that I wouldn't consider to be bad. I would say it's actually quite alright. It has good ideas, it has good moments, it tries to be effective with what the first film did, with how, gross it progresses to get. But because they're just rehashing everything from the first movie, it's something we've already seen before, and not only that, it's done significantly better than this movie. I highly recommend watching the first movie if you haven't seen it already. I believe it's on Netflix. Um, and as for the sequel, I just think it's just all right. But compared to the first movie, it's really disappointing. All right, this next one is another Netflix movie called Don't Move. It's produced by Sam Raimi, and the concept of the character being paralyzed throughout the majority of the movie is really cool and intriguing. And this movie is technically well made. It has really good cinematography and sound. Um, the first half, the first act of the movie, I think, was really interesting. However, not much happens after that for the rest of the movie, and I just wish the way the movie was executed was done differently and was just more explosive and scarier. Next is Y2K. Y2K is a comedy horror movie that has a lot of fun with its premise. However, I found the plot to be quite generic, and the jokes weren't that very funny, although there were some that did make me giggle a little bit. I also liked the 2000 nostalgia. The setting of the 2000s throughout the movie was just very nostalgic, but the flatness of the movie just holds it back. So, In a Violent Nature is one of the most talked about horror movies of 2024. I think it's one of the most creative horror movies of 2024. It is basically a slasher movie from the perspective of the killer, and it also has one of the greatest kills in slasher movie history. Period. I think the slowness of the movie, and just how much of a slow burn it is, actually adds to the movie being unnerving, and that's where like it really gets really horrifying for me personally. Just waiting, just the patience and just anticipation of waiting for something to happen. It's really effective here. However, I did find the characters to be quite boring and very poorly written. They just felt like cardboard cutouts, and I was just waiting for them to die. But when they do die, that's when the movie gets entertaining. I did say that the slow burnness of the movie does effectively help with the horror. However, I do think around 10-15 minutes of the movie could have been cut out, just for the sake of pacing, because there's a few moments, especially near the end, where it just gets really slow for no reason. M. Night Shyamalan's daughter made a movie. in 2024, and I would say it's pretty solid for a debut feature. The first half of the movie, I would say, is actually quite great. It has great use of suspense and really gets pretty unnerving and a little terrifying. But the second half starts to get messy. It has I think it has too many ideas and tries too many things for what it tries to do when it wraps up the story. But the actual ending itself, I would say, is satisfying. Radio Silence, the directive duo who brought us the last two Scream movies and Ready or Not, continue their streak of fun horror movies. The gore in this one is very much there. They clearly had so much fun with it and makes the movie very entertaining. The actor who plays Abigail is also really great. This movie is really funny too. However, I did find the characters pretty unlikable. And the kills do get repetitive as the movie goes on. This movie features the final performance of Angus Cloud. Rest in peace. He delivered a pretty good performance in this one. Speak No Evil. I remember this is also one of the few movies I remember seeing the trailers of, thinking it was going to be shit. I eventually saw it, and it was actually pretty good. James McAvoy is very much the selling point of the movie. His performance and his delivery is so unnerving and creepy. It also adds to the suspense and makes it pretty effective for me personally. I do think the screenplay is a bit conventional, and bit predictable, but this was a pleasant surprise. I do want to watch the original film though. For those who don't know, this is an American remake. The third and final installment of T. West's X trilogy is my least favorite of the three, unfortunately. But with that said, I still had a blast with it. The 80s aesthetic and Mia Goth's performance really fit the energy and the vibe of the movie. However, I will say the character of Maxine isn't as interesting as she was in X. And the scares aren't really as scary or as shocking as they were in the previous two entries of this trilogy. Never Let Go is a horror movie starring Halle Berry, and I would say right off the bat, the best part of the movie is Halle Berry herself. Her performance here is absolutely terrific. There are scenes with a lot of strong tension, and I think are directed quite well. Unfortunately, I didn't find this movie very scary. The scares themselves are well made in an objective point of view, but I just didn't find the content itself to be scary. But the characters and the story itself kept me engaged throughout the entire thing, and I really enjoyed the movie, despite the fact myself not getting scared by this. Another criticism I do have with this movie is that I think the screenplay leaves too many questions unanswered, because I just didn't fully understand when it all came to a close. But overall, this is an enjoyable film. Stop motion is a interesting entry for horror movies, because it has such an intriguing story about making a stop motion movie. Um, I think the stop motion itself, once it gets into the stop motion movie in the movie, I think it's really incredible with really gross and disturbing moments. Um, the horror itself also relies on gross moments, and I think the way it's executed and the way it's shown, it's very effective and it works for me. Just like the previous entry, Never Let Go, this movie does have a lot of unanswered questions, and I feel like and I didn't find myself satisfied enough with how much I knew about those questions when the movie was over. Smile 2 is just like the original movie. It was another movie that is a pleasant surprise, and I would even argue that this movie is better than the original Smile. I think the execution of the scares itself just got better, mainly maybe because director Parker Finn probably just got more experience with directing, and he just knows how to make shit more scarier. And not only that, the script and the story has a psychological horror element, which I think is utilized very well in this and makes the horror very effective. Naomi Scott's performance is very well done. However, I will say the script does have familiarity with some other well-known horror movies out there, and it turned out to be a little predictable. At 2 hours and 7 minutes, I found this movie to be a little overlong, as I did feel the runtime for that. Immaculate is another horror movie that was talked a lot about in 2024. It has some shocking and nasty moments, and with Sydney Sweeney's performance, you really do feel the horror that her character is experiencing. There are some blasphemous twists and turns that really makes the movie more scary. I found the scariest parts of the movie to be the most blasphemous parts of the movie. I will say the main antagonist of the movie is quite conventional and pretty cliched, which makes the finale of the movie just a little bit predictable, but not too predictable. It still tries to have some sort of twist. The script could have used a rewrite or two, but overall, this movie is really good and very effective for a horror movie. We have now entered the part of the list where I think these movies are great, and I recommend these next 11 without question. I Saw the TV Glow is one of the most fascinating movies of the 2020s so far. I absolutely love the cast and production design, the lighting, the camera, the cinematography itself, actually, and the story it tells about this friendship and this very old TV show. While the surreal horror slowly creeps in throughout the movie, I found this movie to be very beautiful. As the time goes on, the movie does get scarier and scarier, but the insane cinematography, lighting, and production design just stand out so well. I will say this movie is a little ambiguous with a couple meanings and motifs it has. I wish they were just explored just a little bit more in this movie, but other than that, this is a fantastic movie. Lisa Frankenstein is much more of a comedy than a horror. And in fact, it's almost a comedy. When it gets scary, it's well, like what you see on screen is terrifying, but the lens and the story is just so comedic and it's so over the top that it's still really funny. And I still want to recommend this movie because I had a great time with this movie. This movie is very campy, and I think it works very well for this type of story that's just so quirky and just having so much fun with itself. In my personal taste, it has a few moments where it gets a little too campy, and I do understand some criticisms that like it's just overly campy throughout its entire thing. But I think it's just a little too campy in a handful of moments, because this movie's great and I had a great time with it. I do want to see what Zelda Williams does next. That would be really cool. So I'm sure this is more of a hot take to put A Quiet Place Day One this high on a list like this. This is my least favorite installment of the franchise, but I still think this is a great movie. If we're going to start with my criticisms of the movie, honestly, I just think the characters in this movie aren't explored as well as the family from the first two movies. And it just made the overall impact emotionally just weaker. But this movie has some terrifying and spectacular moments. The scares really do get you to the edge of the seat, and the visual effects, I think for a horror movie, I think this is some of the best work done in a while. And I also love the concept of like this day one idea for the Quiet Place franchise, and I'm glad it was explored here even more. And also, there's a cat in this movie, which is awesome. Cuckoo, starring Hunter Schafer, features one of the best performances of Schafer's career. I really like her character in this movie. I think she's really well written, and also the villains in this movie are also great. There's a lot of suspenseful sequences, and the suspense itself is a very strong suit for this movie, and it tries to use up as much as it can with it. Just like the previous entries on this list, there are questions that are left unanswered. By the end of the movie, it wasn't fully clear to me, but I think this is a great movie. Very light spoiler warning for Oddity. Like, by very light, I mean, like, I'm just going to talk about something without the spoilers, but if you want to go into this movie completely blind, I would suggest to skip this part. Now, that said, I think this is one of the scariest movies of 2024, personally. The suspense and scares are very well executed with this creepy ass mannequin that's made out of wood. Every time we cut back to him, like you swear to God he moved just a little bit, even though he's probably just sitting still throughout the entire movie. I do wish the characters in this movie were more likable because there is a certain twist in the movie that is meant to be very shocking and it's meant to shock the hell out of the audience, and it is a shocking twist, but I think the actual shock value would have been much more impactful had I liked and cared for the characters more. A24's Heretic, Scott Beck and Brian Woods' comeback after the disaster that was 64. I think that's what that movie, what the fucking Adam Driver dinosaur movie that was really bad. Yeah, this is very much a comeback for them. And it's a very different horror movie for them, and it's also a different horror movie for A24. To know why, just watch the movie because it's scary. Because I think it's great. Hugh Grant delivers a very charming but chilling performance in this. Because of him and some elements and details of the movie, this movie does have a lot of tension and shocking moments. I wish there were more horror elements throughout the whole movie, but the whole experience itself I found to be very uncomfortable, very unnerving, and one of the great horror movies of 2024. Alien Romulus is the best Alien movie since Aliens. This movie is very scary with its sequences and unnerving atmosphere with incredible cinematography. It has some of the best production design of movies in 2024, period. This movie has some crazy ideas that it really goes for, and I think it does a great job with that. Without spoiling anything, there is a critique that I do have with this movie. There's a visual effect that's present throughout the movie that I didn't find very convincing, but again, this is one of the best installments in the Alien franchise, and this is one of the best sci-fi horror movies in many years. The prequel to Richard Donner's The Omen is probably the greatest horror movie prequel ever made. The first Omen is so creepy and eerie, and it just really scared me from the opening scene to the last shot of the movie. I would even say some scenes just scared the shit out of me at that point. The cinematography is beautiful, and I think it has a twist on the 70s look in horror movies. As for criticisms, I think 5-10 minutes of the movie could have been cut out, but great movie. I don't think a movie using AI is the greatest sign. But under the circumstances, it's very understandable why the filmmakers of Late Night with the Devil decided to use it. With that said, I still wish they didn't use AI in this. David Dastmalchian delivers one of the best performances of his career, if not the best performance of his career. I love the concept of this late night talk show just going wrong in a horrifying way. And the more on this movie keeps going, the more disturbing it gets. And by the time we reach the last 15 minutes of the movie, it just becomes so chaotic and so insane and very scary. And in my opinion, it's one of the greatest horror movie endings of all time. Robert Eggers' remake of Nosferatu is probably his very own masterpiece. This movie is so incredibly dark and so gothic, but so insanely beautiful. They pull off so many incredible things just with the camera and some very low lighting. Um, and the movie itself just has some of the best of that in the 2020s. Lily Rose Depp delivers the best performance in her career, and Bill Skarsgård delivers another standout performance in his career. And I love it when he does scary shit like this. I would argue that The Substance is probably the most talked about movie of 2024, and it's for a good reason. It's just one of the most fucked up movies ever made. Demi Moore and Margot Qualley deliver, honestly, performances that are just iconic at this point. The rest of the characters are very well cast. I think all the actors did a great job, including the actor who played the executive. He was very nasty. I think the script itself is brilliantly written with messages about beauty standards in a bunch of industries nowadays. It has something to say about it, and I agree with its messages. This is also a body horror movie, and it's done super effectively. There's so much gore and nasty stuff to the point where it's very ambitious, but also a very beautiful movie. This is a beautifully shot and lit movie with some shit to say. I'd say this is a very first good body horror movie for anyone who's trying to get into body horror, because it is, I mean, it's insane, it's out there, but I think it's just done in a more mainstream and more tasteful way. It's also just very energetic and entertaining, and it is also one of the most popular movies of last year. This may be considered a hot take to some people. I do hear a lot of people say that this movie's overhyped, but this movie's just, it's just so good. The atmosphere, Osgood Perkins' direction and screenplay, and also Nicolas Cage's performance just really scared me with this one. It's so uneasy throughout, and when it gets truly scary, it just gets under your skin, and it's just so vile, and in the best way possible. The cinematography is a thing of beauty, and it's very unique for any kind of movie. But also, like, some camera just placements are just so menacing because, and I say menacing because, like, you would have to rewatch the movie a few times just to notice something in the background without spoiling anything. I love the experience of this movie, and just the themes of the occult is just something I found really fascinating about in this movie, and I think it works really well for this crime serial killer story. I think Neon did a great job marketing with this as well. This is some of the best marketing I've seen for any movie, period. But yeah, this movie, Longlegs, very scary, and it's my favorite horror movie of 2024. So, thank you guys for watching. Yeah, that's kind of it. Please go watch Killer when it comes out on YouTube on October 31st. It's a Friday. It's not very long, so it won't take much of your time. So please do watch it when it's out on October 31st. Thank you.